it's okay.
It's not being brought or yet.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh.
We can be on.
June 8th, you said, is today.
Today is June 8th. Yes. Daisy, the 2 questions, and we're using, those picture cards I have, but you can just talk about it, are how are you showing up right now? And how would you represent, what metaphor would you use for our process so far?
So Lori is not here. Lisa's
How are
not
you,
here.
what's the second one?
Like,
Lisa's not
those picture cards I have, Daisy?
here. Climber cards.
It's like using.
No.
Sorry,
that's me.
Okay, Daisy, can you hear me? Okay. So how would you how would you describe our process and you don't have to pick a picture card, so you can just say. But we'll start with someone else. Who would like to start?
Oh, I need to take notes on this.
Sure.
I don't think you need to take notes on this necessarily. One is how we showed up today, the other is how would you represent our process?
You starting, James?
I was going to give no one else wants to.
Yeah. James.
Showing up today, I'm kind of just feeling going in, just got back from Denver, so I feel like I'm still going in a bunch of different directions right now. So, speak into this one. And then for our progress, I think we'll make where we are, kind of all these big ideas, and hopefully we can kind of narrow it down to that like little spot in the middle where I want to be.
You can go now, we can just
Go
go
for
on. Give it away. Shrimp today, well, I actually, we're thinking about camping this weekend, so I can't be on. So I had a really great day today, so I'm in a really great place and I'm optimistic. And then, about the process, I think the fishing pole, I do feel like we're still sort of fishing for solutions, but I am hoping that we, here on.
Okay. Showing up today happy because I got to look at the mountains today, went on a bike ride, got to be outside, the river's beautiful, flowers are beautiful. I feel like with the process, our time is running out. We have to make decisions and do what we've been tasked to do. So not very much time left in that time timer.
Pick the octopus, 'cause I feel like I've got a ton of stuff going on right now. And then this process has been kind of eye-opening to things maybe thought of small things.
I picked the checklist because this week is a week when I can get a lot of things done because there are no teachers or kids at school. And I'm also like very close to the end of my contracted time when I have to show up to school. And then I picked these gears for our process because I think like if we can get all the different pieces to fit together, it's gonna work really well. But in between last week and this week, I've been kind of stuck on this, how do we balance this with a teacher cafe? And that's a thing I don't think would quite, it's like these gears either might all work really well together or they might get stuck.
My first picture was sort of like summer, get to be outside, boating would be a great thing to be doing. And so just sort of exemplifies summer maybe to me. And this one much to the same of James's Venn diagram. I feel like we're sort of shooting all over the place and there is one bullseye though, and hopefully we're able to come together and say, do we agree that that bullseye is the place to be?
Hi everyone, I haven't been here in a couple of weeks. The changes in dates sort of overlaps with previous events that I had scheduled already. I'm glad to be here. For me personally, I chose this picture of the rocks being balanced. I don't know if there's a term for that. We like see these on I-70 all the time.
Karen's, right?
Karen.
Karen.
It's called Karen.
But
One-
spelled
one
way
syllable.
different from-
Okay.
Karen.
Okay.
Karen. C-A-I-R-N.
I could spell it, but I
The reason being, I feel like I have a lot of different things going on, but got to a point where it's sort of balanced to a certain extent. Not the most, but at least a little bit. And then for this group, I chose the door opening because I think that represents where we're at. The door's open. To come up with a solution that we were tasked to do, and all we have to do now is just take that step to do it.
Just really quickly, Catherine also called and said she'll be here in like 10 minutes, or 15 minutes.
I chose the fishies. Just a lot of going. There's a lot to do. Kids are out and working in the nonprofit world is always fun, trying to figure out how we're gonna do all of the things and the camps and the pickups and the drop-offs while working full-time. And then I chose the puzzle because I feel like this is we've been working really hard to find a solution, and I feel like this is one of the puzzle pieces for our greater project, so. Here's my card.
Daisy, I know you don't have the cards, but how are you showing up today? Thanks, Daisy. Linked in the agenda are the agreements. You can remind yourselves of those. One ask that I have for you guys is one thing I anticipate being difficult for me is balancing my airtime and the fact that I have a bias and I have an opinion. So please, I'm inviting you to please call me out and say, you need to stop for a moment, kind of like, because I think that's something that I'm gonna have trouble with.
And can you just share the agenda one more time, just so it can go right into the notes?
I can just paste into the
Oh,
notes.
that would be awesome.
I just can't talk and do that at the same time. There you go. That's not linking to the agreements, that's linking to the agenda.
I'll
You
click
can
on
edit.
it and then edit it.
So our next part, first, has everyone looked at the agenda and there was some email conversation about it today?
I think parameters, that's what I saw in the email conversation. We don't need to swap anything else, I think it's the parameters.
That's been reflected in the agenda, so we're gonna do our community check-in, if you've gotten any feedback or questions. We're gonna take a moment to look at, like, what would consensus feel like when we're walking out of here today? What do you envision what would help you make that feel good? And then we're gonna look at, with small groups, at the different options and think about what some parameters could be, and then come back together to look at that together. And then the second part is, like, how are we communicating that back out? There's a part on here for hot dogs, but we already did hot dogs, so.
I just put it on there because I didn't know if that's something you guys wanted to do with the.
To do again with these three.
Yeah. I mean, last time Chris and I were able to like edit as we went a little bit, so, feel free to let me know if we decide we wanna pivot, but. I think the biggest thing is obviously getting to a place where we can talk about the community outreach and the town hall after we come to a place that we're happy with the top three options that we're gonna talk about with the parameters.
The only thing I would add, if possible, when we do some reconvene and share or something, I thought it was powerful last meeting, when we all had a chance to go around and each person say something. I think that would be a good thing to try to build into this at some point, if we can have a go around, or even a couple go arounds at different times to hear all voices, much similar to what you were saying with this sort of everybody's forced in them.
Okay, so with that, and Daisy, I don't look at, you're right across from me, so if you use the raised hand, I should see it, but if I don't, we're a pretty small group too, so I don't know if we need me acknowledging everybody to speak. with that, what have you heard in conversation recently? And Lisa, and also looking at Lisa shared that whole RFCEA, the teachers union feedback form as well, so that people can read that more closely maybe than we were able to last time.
I think just on that, I spent last night reading over Lisa's form, and I think there's a lot of hearts and minds kind of winning conversation, winning hearts and minds that needs to take place, I think, before this comes back up as a board topic, because I think otherwise this is just going to end up in the same place it did 2 months ago, regardless of what we decide as a recommendation if it's not taken to that community first. And I think something that was repeated in those comments a few times this time, it was just that sort of, something you said, like the superintendent walking with us and trusting the superintendent, you know, making sure we don't break that in this process.
We are just sharing what we've heard from our community. Anyone else? I have one thing, I'm just trying to pull it up.
I did hear from one person who works in the district about the important role that the superintendent plays, and that person is our leader of who we're following, and the importance that would be to make sure that that person is here for a long haul, and the importance of housing could play in that role.
The housing committee, a couple of us met with Ben to kind of get him up to speed on what the housing committee, what our work has looked like over the past 8 years and what needs to happen going forward. And there's a push for the housing committee to present pathways to ownership to the board by December, which is gonna be a big push for us to pull off. I think we can do it. But I think that brings up, I think I've expressed this in one email, but questions about like prioritization of funds and how to do that.
Can you explain a little more by what you mean by it'd be a big push?
For that group to pull off, because we're also redoing those guidelines for eligibility. So we're gonna have to like invite new members to the housing committee for sure and get some more people involved in this work. And I think Ben's ready to lead that, but it's gonna be a big push with people involved.
Can you talk about what you said at the end about the distribution of funds?
Well, if we have that 2.4 million in reserves, and we're using some of it for superintendent housing. But we also, that's like the big pool that we're pulling from for staff housing pathway ownership as well. So like, and if they're happening at the same time, which I think is important and good, and what Lisa voiced in her email, it's just making sure we're not overcommitting ourselves financially.
Again, that's ultimately up to the board who control the budget.
Yeah.
It might be nice to have on this,
I think it's just like, as someone who's like, if I'm being tasked with working on staff housing pathway to ownership, but then there's no money. The housing committee is worried that we're gonna look terrible if we can't present a solid staff pathways to ownership. That people are gonna be like, you guys failed. That was on you. The board and the superintendent tasked you with that. And if we can't come up with that, then I feel pretty shitty about myself. And there has to be money to do that.
And I think we're talking long-term solutions, not something that we'll have a decision that's presented in December, just to alleviate some of that pressure. Like these are the preferred tools when we start going down this path. And
Yeah.
These are the tools we're gonna implement and use over 2 decades, 3 decades as we cycle through staff. We need to be able to build 25 homes we can sell to staff tomorrow, right? Like something.
Yeah.
And that's not the blueprint.
Just on that note, I have, not only this week, but just in general, this process, heard from a few staff members and that are, maybe let's say, a little bit more positive on the superintendent system, but I think part of that is that from the conversations that they're thinking that, you know, if we do a assistance of 300 grand, that is also going to be the same when the staff program rolls out, that it is also going to be of the same magnitude or more because they earn less. And so I think that, you know, like that's a bit too, like, you know, making sure the program, the assistance is mirrored and sort of that equity of it, not just because I think there'll be a lot of unhappy staff if we go, oh, okay, 300 grand is what we're going to provide for the superintendent's role. And then staff go, well, your pathway ownership is 30 grand. Like there needs to be some, I feel, you know, there's some people seem pro it, I think, are thinking that they will have the opportunity in the future to get equal or more assistance.
And along that line, that's what Landed was doing when they did it in Denver for the, I think it's University of Denver, University of Colorado, Denver, sorry, I don't know which one, but they were offering it to everyone and it was similar amounts based on what, really it was based on the choice of how they purchased, but it was significantly, we talked about that already, it was significantly less than the amounts that we discussed here. So I do think that's something to think about because it wasn't just being offered to one. And when I talked to the other recruiting firm, they also were really harping on that be careful if you're throwing this out, that you are trying to do it in an equitable manner because it's gonna be really come back to bite you. If someone else if one person's getting significantly more than the rest.
Yeah,
And they actually really pushed, like, if they said, if you're doing something like this, we think you should be rolling it out for everyone at once. But I said, I don't know if that's possible.
I would hate for, you know, the housing committee to be dragged into this negatively on the back end when they had no sort of input at the start. And because I feel like that housing committee seems to be very well respected from what I've seen and heard within the district, of, you know, being quite fair, having a process, you know, so I would hate for you guys for something to happen, so, you know, be unfair to, you know, the entire committee that sits on it, or the entire, the group of people that sit on that and put the extra work and come back on them. No fault of their own.
I think if we're looking at that equity lens, I would agree that it should be the same amount. But then also if we're looking at building a house or buying a house for the superintendent, where does that land then on the same or different? Because if we're building a house, then that's already different from the other rentals that we're doing. And the amount of money for the rent of it would be maybe different. And if we're trying to look at it as being an incentive, and that's the whole idea of why we're looking to provide housing for a superintendent, is to make it an attractive thing for them. But if we're supplying them a house that's really maybe net zero if they're having to pay whatever percent of their salary, and that's close to what the open market would be. And then they're having to be pigeonholed into that one place that they can live in the district, that might not be a positive add-on for what we're trying to accomplish.
I think I let us kind of I probably steered us off that topic.
Right.
So I think these are all things we'll come up with when we talk about parameters. Does anyone else have things to pass on that they've heard, or feedback, or reactions to what Lisa shared in that survey? You can pass me your cards too. Or we just start checking. You're showing up today.
I didn't talk to a lot of people about this the past couple of weeks, I just haven't had the opportunity to, but I did speak with one parent who really, it was good, it was a good reminder. She framed it as like the most important thing that we need to be keeping in mind is what's going to benefit the students, and that the students should be at the heart of our decision. Her perspective on it was that meant keeping an equity lens that we've been talking about, but also in some ways thinking about the equity situation different from, or the roles of, teacher housing and superintendent housing very distinctly, because we do want to keep the equity lens, but also it's functionally a different tool for attracting and maintaining a superintendent position. It's a different role.
I'm trying to get us back kind of on our time frame, but we'll adjust it. The next question for the group, and I envision this as a go around again. To walk out of here feeling like we came to a decision together today, are you envisioning, and this isn't like something you have to stick to, but are you envisioning that we spend the time here that are all in full, like, yes, I fully agree and support this? Are you envisioning that at the end of today, we do like a fist to five and with nobody who's still at a fist? Are you envisioning today that we all say like, people can choose, I put my name on this or I don't put my name on this? Is it like the Supreme Court and we have agreeing opinions and dissenting opinions? Let me take a moment and think about that first.
Personally, as a board member, I feel like the task force should make that decision. I feel like we've had enough conversations with you guys to inform you guys of what our hope is that comes as a result of this. And so I feel like I defer to the leaders in the room to define what you guys feel consensus is for you. Because we won't be voting.
I think ideally consensus is everyone agrees on the same kind of policy, but just realizing that that probably isn't a reality because there's a lot of intricacies, I guess, in coming up with a decision. I think consensus for me is coming out with, again, these multiple options and knowing where you feel the most comfortable with having those options come out to the community from this task force. Right? Not necessarily saying that only this one option came out from these task force and every one of the task force members agreed to it, because that's not fair. But saying these are the 2 or 3 policies or recommendations that the task force came up with. And I guess if we want to tie our names to specific ones or vice versa, not tie our names to specific ones, that would be fair to me.
I guess, I hear what Jasmine's saying and I do agree, since we're not voting. But what my hope was out of this task force was that it seemed like we took all of was our decision as a board, and then we got all this pushback, and so it was said we should have a task force. So it'd be nice if people who are on the task force can say, we met as a group and this is our suggestion to the school board. So that when we work the next time as a school board, we can say, we took a suggestion from the task force, and this is what the task force told us they believe we should do. And I feel like if it's different or the same what that decision is, it seems like we will carry more weight than just us being unilaterally saying this is what we decided to do. And I feel like it's an important thing for us to be able to, as a board, say, we got direction from the task force and this is what the task force told us they thought was in the best interest of the district.
Does that necessarily have to be one suggestion?
It doesn't necessarily have to be one suggestion, it can be a menu, but that this is what we were guided by from our task force. All right.
Yeah, I feel like it would be great if we could offer a menu, or if we came to the conclusion that there was one clear front runner, then hey, that's lovely. I think that in my mind, consensus for this group is that the options that we end up with, that there's nothing on there that somebody feels like, hey, this is such a horrible option, I don't want my name on it. I would hope that after all of the discussion that we've had in the past meetings, I feel like we've built enough of a shared foundation in understanding what these options are, that we're all informed enough to be able to say, like, yes, I feel like option A, B, and C are okay, and D, E, F, or whatever, not okay. Even if it's not perfect, right? And I'm sure we all have opinions about which one is better, maybe more suited to a given situation. But recognizing also that the board is going to be making the decision within context that we don't even necessarily know yet, in terms of hiring a future superintendent, or in terms of what money availability looks like in the future year, in terms of what other situations are going on in parallel related to the other housing committee, things like that. So yeah, my hope is just simply that we can come to some sort of agreement that there's a set of options that at the very least are potentially functional in a certain context, and that we're offering to the board, with the recognition that we might each individually have different perspectives about which is best or which is less good.
I agree a lot, Maureen, with that idea of like a menu and thinking Kenny about what you were saying about like, we are saying that we think like as a group, I see that as being like, you know, like we have these three things and there are so many options within those things. So it's like, I see our role as being, you know, like the communities that wait, hang on. So our role is defining what's like, this is not okay, what's okay, and what's like great, and kind of, so giving some direction within those of saying like, you know, this is, there's some limits on what we think is a good idea within these options and helping define those limits. And so coming out of here with a menu, because it's like what you're saying, it's not gonna be a one size fits all. But some options that we think the community could build agreement on.
I feel like the board has named this as a priority and have asked us to provide input into that decision, and that they will make that decision whether we come to consensus or not. So it's in our best interest to come to consensus. Otherwise, you're right back in the same spot you were 3 months ago, or the board will just make a decision.
Can't talk, sorry.
You
I'm so trying to type one more people so I gotta make some.
can always tell scripts of thoughts and
Yeah, I was
how
gonna say,
people.
It's also recorded, so you can just go home afterwards.
Right, thanks,
It's like in college and you take a picture of the slide saying, oh, I'll do the notes.
Yeah, that
So Nathan
Wait a minute,
said
you're
that
college
we are
class.
tasked with making decisions, we don't wanna leave
I
the
would say
board like, well, here we go.
With providing clear direction and input into the process. The decision is the board's.
I agree.
Katie, we're sharing what would consensus feel like for us after today?
Am I up?
No, Linda's up.
Okay. I guess I do hope to come to a consensus. I am hoping we talk a little bit more about framework before we do that. And I'm just hopeful we have the time to do that. Because I feel like I want to know, I think maybe every parameter, but I just want to know, are we talking about giving someone 1 million, 500, or 200? I just think it's helpful. I'm really hopeful that we can get some parameters. Because I feel like the ideas we have are still a little, that's what I talked about fishing. Like to narrow it down and hope that we make it.
Do you want to go to what I'm going to say?
Yeah, give me a minute.
Just so you know, Katie, I opted out. I'm a board member. We're not voting.
My idea of consensus coming out of today would be for all of us to agree on what our recommendation is. I think that with the way that this went already with the community and the board, that if we don't get that recommendation that has a full housing task force recommendation, and we have a split vote, dissenting opinions written against it, like, I don't think that's going to do the board any good. I think it's just going to keep us in the same position that we were, well, the board was in before they started this process. So I think, to me, that's what consensus looks like, is that. And I also think that only literally, once Trinity makes it here, 50% of the board members, if we all agree to something, at best, at worst, again, that could be only 50% of the board of the housing task force agrees anyway. So I feel like as 9 members, we need to get to that consensus, just so that we at least hit a 50% threshold guaranteed, even if the other members come back and say in the future, oh, I wouldn't agree with that. We can at least say, well, at least 50% of the board can at least say at least 50% of the task force agree with it.
Easy?
You go.
So I think it's up to the task force what consensus is. From a board member perspective, I would appreciate, I think what we asked for is some guidance. I agree with Nathan that ultimately it's gonna be whatever board is sitting at the time that this has to happen, that has to make the decision. And I think that it would be very difficult to have like a complete concrete bow on it. This is the one and only thing that is okay. I mean, I feel like already throughout this task force, a huge first step was understanding the needs. I feel like the board had a solid understanding of why this was a need, and that was something that wasn't communicated out. And so I feel like we've reached that consensus, but it hasn't been voted on. So I think the voting mechanism is up to you all. I would just like it to be clear, I think, from a board member's perspective, where it falls, like where you all fall.
Were we all fall individually or were we fall
As a group, as a collective.
Trinity was sharing what we would view as consensus walking out tonight. And everyone has shared, but you can have it.
Share now.
I want to add something to mine if I can, which is that, James, I think you brought up a really good point of how do we reach back out to the rest of the task force.
I was just sharing with James that only 4 people are not here today from the task force. So we have, during the time that I called everybody, 3 of the past task force members shared that they are no longer able or want to be part of it. So I've updated, everybody has a contact list. So only 4 task force members are not able to be here today. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that.
I think, with one Kendall's point, I think
Yeah.
the ones that dropped out, if they dropped out because they couldn't make the last couple of meetings because it went beyond the original thing, I think out of grace, we should ask them if they want a voice back in the final recommendation, because they committed to doing the 4 meetings on time. If they couldn't make these last 2 because they changed, I think giving the grace as our sort of task recommendation, agreements, to allow them to have that final voice if they put in the time, I feel it's only fair to them.
Yeah, I mean, none of them were taken out because they didn't attend.
No, so what, but if they felt they couldn't meet the last, couple of meetings because we went past the original deadline, and that's the reasoning why they aren't, didn't want to carry on, if it isn't, then it isn't, they just didn't want to be part of it. And more, that's fair enough, but I think that should be given to them as a, if they put the time in on those original 4 meeting times, I think.
Maybe it would help Jasmine to clarify who you're considering not here.
Well, so Angela is not here, Lisa's not here, Lori's not here, and Tim Belinsky's not here. Those are 4. The people that I spoke to on the phone that I don't think, well, from my phone call, it didn't sound like they were dropping out for anything other than personal reasons, but it was Caitlin Foster, Sean Nesbitt, and Jen Campbell. Those were the
They've
3.
all only been on one meeting.
Yeah, so they all just said they don't want to be, they didn't want to be contacted. So, but there's only 4 task force members that personally I feel like, yes, it would fall on you guys to reach back out, have a conversation with them. Again, removing the board itself from that conversation that will happen between you guys.
Trinity, do you want to share or you can also pass for now, if you come back, you can jump back in at any point.
Yeah, let's see what, guess what other people said.
So I'm gonna tell you, the notes are great. I don't know about that. Some people have shared they want, the opportunity to present the options and say, well, I, Crystal Lafco, think this is a great one, but I actually don't like this one, so I can put my name to specific ones. Other people wanted fist of 5, so it's not a vote. It's more of like, okay, it's maybe not my favorite idea, but I go with it. And it was shared by a lot of people that we need to make a recommendation to the board as a collective group. So that the board isn't back where they started. Because they made a decision or they rolled out their ideas and then all of a sudden it was like, no, And so then it was, well, why don't you get these task force members? And so now we really do need to be the grounding to whatever decision they make. The task force did this, and this was their recommendation.
Mhm.
Does that sum up what people have said?
Yeah, but also with the caveat that that recommendation could be, there's 3 great options to choose from depending on the
It
content.
doesn't have to be one, yeah.
Could be
It just-
one, but it may be multiple.
Yeah, I think that would probably be mine, that we do have to come to some kind of agreement, I think. You would think a room full of adults could be able to do that. And that's my hope, I suppose, that we can come to a real consensus, because otherwise I don't.
And what does that look like to you?
To me, it's the third one, it's like everybody agrees that we signed on for this and these are the recommendations that we make. Multiple or singular,
And I just wanted to clarify again that it's more than 50% of the task force is here today.
I think it just looks empty because the board members.
Just the shrinking of the tables.
Yeah.
Makes it like, feels like.
It's so much better than doing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess technically there are seven more people that aren't here, but we didn't know that 3 had dropped out and shared with us, so thank you for letting us know that.
So we're gonna move, and feedback on how we do this part is more than welcome. Jasmine and I were going back and forth a little bit today, and I think I wrote some things and you wrote some things and I wrote some things back, so maybe not really back and forth so much as that we've split into smaller groups, and each group work on parameters for one of the options, build, buy, or down payment assistance. That's what came out of the spend your 6 points last time very strongly as our top 3. And then we'll rotate, so each group will go to each of them. My proposal for how you're framing it in your small group is that you come up with some parameters that you think would be too restrictive, that are too much, some that you think are too lax, and then we could try and find somewhere in the middle from those. But I'm open to ideas on how if you envision that differently.
The only question, I like that idea, I think that's a great idea. The only question I have is, do we really wanna go down too much the parameters of buy and build? I mean, really in a lot of senses, it's the same thing. And like, it's sort of like the same capital outlay, it's the same final effect. And do we wanna maybe just like brainstorm, like what's the difference of like the timing or some like things that would be the difference between those two, instead of like spending a lot of time on separate areas that are really gonna be the same outcome?
I think I like that, sorry. I like that, because I think they are so similar, and we could maybe just combine them and deal with the 2 major things. And I also think that in some ways that makes sense, because the equity assistance option in some ways requires more, there's like so many different moving parts and ways you can think about that, complexities to that, I feel like, in some ways more so than the buy or build option, so it might balance well to have 2 groups.
So I agree that the buy or build, they're the same option, the district owns the house, we already own property. Like it's, in ways it's kind of already fitting into some parameters that we, I think that's where you would start ideally, is where we're gonna honor the current parameters in place for employees who rent homes. And if not, why? The equity, there's a lot more, like what's the ceiling, is there a match, there's like all these other things to talk about.
if necessary. Yeah, I would say that too, sorry. That I don't wanna get into too many of the parameters, because I feel like that's the board's, like to work out the kinks and the details. Like, I feel like that's not what we were tasked for. I think we were, to some extent, like some breakdown is good, and then, but not too like nitty gritty. And also there's nothing about me that's full, these are prescriptions, I just forgot my other glasses.
There's something about it that's cool.
I'm gonna call myself. It's interesting to me that we all think buy and build are the same, because when I first heard this proposal back in February, my knee jerk was like, but we're land rich. Like, that is a huge asset the district has, that we have these parcels of land that we can't really use for staff housing. They don't make sense for doing units the way we have units right here. And we can't sell them because we take a huge hit on them if we sell them. And so to me, those feel like very different options with very different advantages. I think Marie and then James.
To get to what Trinity was saying about not wanting to get too deep into the details, I think one option for approaching how we figure out the parameters is instead of saying specifically, like, we recommend that the board, gosh, I can't think of a good example right now. We could simply identify what some of the parameters are that we want the board to think within. So for example, we would like the board, if they go the equity route option, to consider whether or not they want to have some sort of buyout clause if the house is sold in the down market, for example. So just acknowledging what parameters exist and things that we want the board to attend to could be an okay way of going instead of specifically delineating what those parameters are.
Well, I just want to second what you just said, but yeah, district owning all the land, that document you shared. But I also think there is a bit of a difference. I agree there will be a lot of similarities in the sort of parameters for a buy or build option, but I think for me, some of the differences is if the district is looking at buying it, we're already talking, the whole reason we're here is because there is a shortage of quote unquote affordable average houses here. If we buy an existing house as a district, that takes one house of a very limited pool off the market in perpetuity, essentially. That's the route we're going. I also feel like building a house allows the district to build, doesn't have to settle on what shows up on the market, at the time they decide on it. They build what they think is right as a board for the superintendent position. I think that if we build a house as a district, I think it can be built to be ADA livable, because, I would say that, what happens if we have a superintendent candidate that is a person with disability or has a partner or child? And I think that needs to be taken into account. So actually, I was reading for something else this week, but the Department of Labor actually considers that people with disabilities to be the largest minority group in the US, and the WHO considers it the largest minority group globally. So I feel that building allows us to take that into factor from day one and not try and modify a house. And also I think the main thing is like building new, that house is new. There's not going to be these unforeseen costs, or those unforeseen costs are less likely, I feel, like with a build new than buying an old house. And those unforeseen costs, once we commit to this program, or if we commit to this as a district, that means we're going to have to fund those down the line if it needs a new roof or plumbing or whatever.
Wondering before we dive into this discussion, should we just take a quick pulse check? Put 2 if you want to do both descriptions. Put 1 if you think buy and build should be one category.
Wait, say that again.
2 if you want buy and build to be separate groups. Okay, Kenny and Nathan, I think we're gonna go ahead and do both, and maybe they'll end up being 1.
That's right.
The 3 groups.
I'll just say, I think the buy versus build is a financial decision, which again lies with the board. That's the key distinction is, it's just, if it's more money, then it's up to the board who controls the purse.
To add to that, what I consider buy build too is the amount of staff time it would take for a build. How much time are we asking of our district staff in order to plan out, create, follow, work with build versus the buy option is much quicker and it's not taking up staff time.
So when we, sorry.
I didn't raise my hand.
Oh, I didn't
I'm trying to
either.
raise my hand.
Sorry.
You,
Thank you. I think that, so points like these are great to, like if we write out recommendations to board, consider staff time, so making sure that we capture those. So important, but I don't think we need to like.
Too in depth. Right now.
yeah, and I really like the way Maureen, you're framing it as recommendations to the board. Like we, as Nathan keeps saying, we can't set parameters. We cannot set anything binding, but we can set recommendations that are public, and if the board chooses, whatever board is present, to go against the recommendations of this publicly visible group, then they do that at their own risk. But, and
That's where I was coming from, is like, thank you for the wording. Because that's where I was being like, I don't think parameters are up to us.
yeah, so maybe we all agree to change it to recommendations.
Yes.
Detailed or specific recommendations
Yes.
under the
Under the
umbrella of-
recommendations.
I like the way Maureen phrased it, recommendations with specific considerations.
Mhm.
So recommendation is to buy with these specific considerations and build these specific considerations. That's good, right?
We can, so let's split into 3 groups. Let's try and balance board members at each group. Board members, I think you're mainly watching this. Krista, Nathan, and I, let's balance ourselves as district staff at each of the groups. And otherwise, I think community members balance yourselves as well. And we're pretty well balanced today. So Daisy, how are we gonna involve you? Do you want,
Girls thing.
well, I'd like you to go to each one. What if, who wants to? We're gonna rotate. Who wants to adopt Davy on their computer?
Yeah, but why don't we go into different rooms and we'll go.
I can adopt her easily, just like.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I don't think there's 5 minute rooms being used right now.
I like the empty when I walked in.
I can carry a fair one.
Yeah.
Bigger.
Daisy, you're gonna be Jasmine's buddy.
So do we have a time? We just want to cycle.
Let's do 10 minutes at each one.
Okay.
So,
I'm not
I think
taking
we
notes.
wanted to.
no, you're not taking notes on this.
Okay.
Board members, can I task you with being in the 10-minute timer and then we'll rotate?
Sure.
Let's have Vi stay here. Bill, go to the crystal room right across the hall.
No, that's, that one group stay here and cycle through all three. So
She's gonna She's gonna be Jasmine's buddy. Okay, gotcha. Sorry, we need to like see the notes that were left.
Ah, nice, okay.
Where's that gonna be going?
I didn't pick, what was my Colorado room, the big one, forgot to, just on the.
definitely scared and COVID unrelated.
Okay, we're unmuted now.
Okay.
Does anybody have clarifying questions about any of what, about things that are written on these posters? We had,
I keep doing that to you, I'm so sorry.
I know, it's because I'm being a terrible.
I'm-
Our group had a clarifying question for the initial group at equity investment, which was, were you thinking that 250 to 400 figure was the combined, the homeowner plus the district match, or were you thinking that was the district investment?
We were thinking this.
Yeah, thank you. So the district sets a 2% for each 1% put in, so it wouldn't be then a proportionate.
$1. Not percent, $2 for every $1 invested.
Oh, it says $2?
Yeah,
2-to-1 match is what that says.
It was confusing because
No,
below
I'm
it
talking
says
about the
match
blue
up to
note down below where
Oh.
the proportionate is circled.
Yeah.
That definitely says percentage.
Yeah, I think it was really.
I wrote that in the blue.
Yeah.
And we had thought that it could be either proportionate could mean a 1-to-1, like whatever the district puts in percentage-wise, they get back. Or my personal preference was for it to be a higher percentage, like 1.5 or 2. So like if we put in, say market rates stay absolutely the same, and we put in 10,000, we get more than that back.
Okay.
Similar to what Landon was doing, my goal for that was to then help grow a program that could be used for down payment assistance or for equity investment, for other staff members as well.
And that's exactly what Lana said, that helps you grow the program, cover costs and.
We have, or actually, do you wanna take that, Beth?
What's your question, Daisy? Yeah, everything's on the table because that process is not started yet. Yeah, that process will start in August, and it'll be, what are all the options for pathways to home ownership for staff and equity investment? We'll do this kind of exercise in that.
Any other clarifying questions?
are you?
Bubbly water's really bubbly.
To your point though, Daisy, I guess it's important for us to recognize that we could choose that and the housing committee could not.
What was the name of that company?
fund. Those fund.
It's a very similar model to Landed.
I guess we just started before housing prices took off.
Yeah.
Sorry, now you have us all looking at this, Daisy.
I have one other clarifying question on the equity investment page. It's a little confusing. It could be up to 250 to 400 and then 2-to-1 match up to 300. District will match up to 300. So is it the district will put in 150 if the candidate has 150 or
We match the candidates at the 2 to 1, so if they put in 100, we put in 2.
but how much could they put in max is my question.
But
The
we were
max
saying that it could
bid.
go up to 400,000 maybe.
So they could put it up to.
So they could go
Kenny
200.
thought I had thrown out 300,000, why not just throw up a range?
Okay,
Does that clarify, Kate?
yeah, I was just confused with the numbers because it seemed to align.
So the first part that's written there is, with the parentheses part was second of, maybe it isn't 300,000 is the number.
I think the key thing was that we wanted, a ratio of some sort, like a 2-to-1 match, and then with some sort of cap, so it's not limitless.
So I just wanna clarify, because I think this is important for your task force to clarify. The max that you guys are talking about is the 4.
Kenny threw up a range of 250 to 400 to be the max the district would commit to. There is no, I had used an example of the 150 to 300.
So I don't think we have.
I think that needs to be a task force clarification.
Right,
not-
I
Yeah.
agree.
That's, all I'm saying is I think it's important for the task force to come to a consensus on
the
that.
amount.
I get that you guys just used a model, but I think just for the sake of like it not being a Kenny said, you know, like the
Right.
task force should be like, oh, this is what our range was.
I agree, and it's interesting, I came in tonight being like a max of money output would be an important recommendation. But as I'm thinking about these as are they recommendations for this year, are they recommendations, we were talking about the example of a house that sold last year and how now that house would sell for a lot more, so like if we are too specific in our recommendations. One thing I'm wondering about, and our group I didn't think about when I was at that group, so I'm wondering if anyone has thought about this. We talked about pre-qualified, have we talked about that amount being a max of 20% of the selling price of the house? Because then we could like keep the selling price of the house as like within a range of average market, so that, because Modest didn't really make it on that one. But that would be a way, like if, instead of setting a dollar amount, if the dollar amount is 20% of the average cost of a 3-bedroom house, we'd like, this is some semantics that we would need to talk about tonight. That could help us have a better, not expiring when as the market changes number.
I like
Agreed. I like that. James.
Just to clarify, are you saying then that 20% will be determined by what a superintendent can qualify for as a loan without any assistance, that what determines the 20%? And then the district gives that up to that or however it works out. So they can either have a lower mortgage or they can buy a nicer house, is that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, Linda, you're money people, I'm gonna refer to you in this, but like, if you go to the bank and you're like, hey, how much could I afford as a monthly pay, like, they look at your salary and they say how much they're willing to take a risk on you paying as a monthly payment. And then if that's your monthly payment, then you know what 80%, like how much the bank is willing to loan you, that's 80% of your house buying cost. And this can make up 20%. I'm confusing myself.
I was understanding you to say that you could say the average price in the Roaring Fork Valley or in our district, school district or home is $1. And the average prices are hard. I don't know if we're saying median or if we're saying lower end of the average prices, or, and I think that's a curious thing, but say we were to say the average price now is $1.5 million. And if that was it, then are we saying 20% of that we can give up to $300,000 then towards
That was my
match.
understanding.
I think ours combined with theirs should be up to that amount.
Up to the 20%.
We'll bridge the gap up to 20%.
I like that.
Yes.
Yeah. That makes sense to me.
Okay.
Another question that we haven't talked
To
about.
the 20% on payment they need, which is what Landon does.
With Daisy the Allen.
Sorry.
the only thing that I wanted to clarify is if we do this percentage model of up to 20%, what if the superintendent coming into this position can only afford up to 5? Does that mean that the district puts up to 15? Or vice versa, if the superintendent can put up 15, does the district only put 5? Is that sort of the idea?
So whatever that 20% of the purchase price is, we fill in the gap wherever the superintendent can't match.
Okay.
I totally lost track, I'm sorry, I don't know when you guys put your.
Yeah, one of these.
I think
I don't
that's
think-
for me,
Okay.
for sure.
James, Kenny, Linda, thank you, Marie.
My only concern with that, I put it up, is that if we have a superintendent that comes in, they've got debt, they've got medical debts, whoever knows what their financial situation is. But if we say that, and let's say they go to a bank and the bank goes, okay, based on your salary and your debt to income ratio and all the rest of it, we'll lend you X. Well, what happens if X can only buy that superintendent a house that's $500,000 or $700,000? That does, that's, even with the match, that's not gonna get you to 1.5 million, for that 20%. So it feels like the equity option, the way we're talking about it, is benefiting superintendents with the most means of privilege. It's not gonna.
That's why I like what Kenny was
Kenny,
saying,
Linda.
you know.
I think it could be very detrimental if we say we're only gonna pay up to the 20%, because if you look at a $1.2 million house right now, and if you put 20% down on a $1.2 million house, the monthly payments is like $9,000 a month. And on the superintendent's salary, right now, that's leaving $3,500 for everything else that they have to do in life. And so I don't think that's feasible even, and I think our whole idea of doing this as like some kind of equity investment is to make it so people can buy. And I think if we also look at it from a teacher point of view, if we're looking to do something that's matching, and so if we have a teacher now who wants to buy a townhome, and like really the townhomes here are now going for $800,000, and so we're saying we're gonna help you get up to $160,000, they're not gonna be able to qualify for a loan then that comes in at $640,000. And so I think by raising that up to this $250,000 to $400,000 as what the district would put in, would allow for superintendent to buy a house, would allow for teachers to buy a house. And I think if we're capping it and saying that 20%, we're really limiting who's still gonna be able to buy a house. And I think the idea of this is to help get people in houses.
Linda, Trinity, James, me, Nathan.
I'm just nodding.
Okay. Linda, James, me, Nathan.
Actually, I want to hear what Nathan says first, because it might answer my question, so.
You got
But
both?
whatever,
The flip side of
whatever
that
order.
20% is if you have someone come in with extreme means and it's like, yeah, I'm putting up $1 million, I'm gonna buy this $7 million house, and we're on the hook for like whatever to get to 20%.
Right.
That was
You
a question.
technically have no ceiling,
Mhm.
it's whatever the most expensive house someone can afford is. Yeah, cap.
The thought that's kind of come to me as we're kind of getting very much into the weeds of this one is, would it be a recommendation to the board to say, because there is so much unknown on this for superintendent and the staff that as we just mentioned, is to say our recommendation would be, let's see what the staff program comes with, and then let the board tailor a version of that kind of mirrors, but it's tailored towards the superintendent's role and salary and kind of thing, so that what we're saying is let's not maybe make identical programs, but let's roll that out, or same time, but let's mirror the two programs rather than us sort of get into the weeds of this, that we might not be able to get anywhere near in another pathway to ownership as that work sort of progresses. So that, and then we kind of work on these so that there is always, when a superintendent comes into the district, there is always a landing spot that maybe they use for a year, 2 years till they find their home that they want to live in for the rest of their life and be our superintendent for 2 decades, just kind of, just a way to sort of go like, hey, let's move these programs in parallel, and then when we get the staff program gets nearer to its end, the board has the ability then to go, hey, let's kind of make a similar but tailored to superintendent program.
Me, then Marie, and then Katie, and then I think we need to think about what our process
Yes.
is gonna look like. I'm realizing that I had a huge misunderstanding of equity investment, and I always thought it was gonna be no more than 20% of the purchase cost of a house. And I think maybe that comes from a misunderstanding of how we buy real property in general, because I always forget that some people can buy houses in cash completely. And that I always thought it was financially irresponsible to put somebody in a house where they can't, like, one of the reasons why staff housing has really struggled, or I've really struggled with down payment assistance for teachers, is that we always thought we'd be putting teachers in a house that they'd end up foreclosing on and defaulting on, because that mortgage payment would be too high. And right now, it feels like I think you guys brought up a huge thing about, like, if we do a 2-to-1 match, this requires a huge sum of money from that person, and that then bringing in like that equity piece and how we create generational wealth. And I'm wondering if I have a misunderstanding about whether it would be irresponsible, like when we're talking about someone who might have huge student debt, is it irresponsible to put them in a house that's worth way more than they could have, like, are they gonna be able to pay us back if they leave the district in 2 years? Or like, is there a misunderstanding there?
I think it's the second or third bullet, but the homeowners have to pre-qualify through a bank. Like that, like they're gonna take the credit risk, they're gonna do the credit check, they're gonna say, we're not loaning to this person. If they say we have $450,000 to put down, we found a house that's $1.2 million, yeah, that's like a 40% down payment. And the bank says, yeah, you can totally afford that.
It reduces the payment for the state, actually just getting for 20%. Like, you're buying
It was
You're
supposed to
buying
be
down
Maureen,
there.
then Katie, then Jasmine, and Trinity.
I just wanted to respond to James. I think, I hear what you're saying about seeing what they roll out for the teachers, but I think that my understanding based on what we've heard from the board is that the timing of that doesn't work, that we need to have our recommendations kind of ahead of that. And in some ways, it could just be the flip then, that what we're doing is we're offering an example, we'll see how it works with the superintendent, and then potentially the work that we've done here as a task force could be picked up by the housing task force as well.
I just respond to that quickly. I think I'm putting forward a recommendation that we recommend that we wait till the board makes the move on equity assistance for the superintendent until December, when the whole program gets rolled out for staff.
Right, and I hear, I'm gonna cut both of you guys off, it was Katie's turn.
I was kind of responding to James too, with the idea of putting that on hold, and in the meantime, focusing on buy build, and I just wanted to reiterate Kenny's point via email today, that my concern in focusing on that is that we're plowing through a bunch of the reserves, a lot more than we would be for an equity investment model, which then is ultimately limiting options for the team to consider pathways to ownership for teachers.
Jasmine, and Trinity.
I was just gonna add that I think it's important for it to be restated that when we're hiring a superintendent at the end, we're doing contract negotiations, there is a requirement that the consultant do like a financial background check on the candidate that we are in conversations with. So, aside from that piece, and then obviously doing a having them pre-qualify, like, I think it helps us make sure that we are not setting ourselves up for somebody who's gonna leave the district, to default.
Trinity?
I'm saying I don't think it needs to go further than we can make it an either or situation. 350 or 20%, whichever, is most equitable. We can use that language, right? So that we don't have to split hairs.
Kenny, really quickly, and then I'm gonna process check us.
I think the idea of somebody who could default on it because it's too much, if we do have this money that we put up for the house, there would be 50 teachers probably would say, I'll take on that contract. If the person who is paying
They can afford the mortgage.
right, but there's gonna be people who are saying, oh, there's that much money available towards the down payment, I can assume. I think we're not in like this, we're gonna default it. If that person defaults, it seems like there'll be a lot of people who would be wanting to move into that same situation.
I'm gonna propose, here's what I propose. We said pulse check, and how I propose we do this pulse check is for each of these three, we do a fist of 5. 5 is like, I am good to propose pretty much that. 4 is like, it needs a little conversation, but I'm pretty much there. 3 is in the middle. 2 is it needs a bunch of work. One is like, I have a lot of reservations about this, but I'm good having it as an option with more work done. 0 is hard stop on that one right now.
And the board does not vote.
Or it's not gonna vote on this one.
Can I ask one more question before we go? There seems to be one thing that we're missing, maybe in all three of these. And that was a big conversation about previous ownership having to sell houses to qualify and all of that. And that seems to be missing on all of these. And is there anything that we want to add to that?
We talked about it, it didn't make it on the paper.
I think what we said as a group was that in that regard, that as it currently stands, as staffing to staff housing have to give up any houses within 12 months of them entering staff housing, that the same should apply currently, but that should be looked at so that staff also have the option, even if they're renting here, have the option to buy a house in Kansas or wherever they're from, or wherever they can maybe buy a cheap house and rent it and start building generational wealth. And at that point, if it changes for staff, it should change for superintendent as well, was kind of what we discussed.
Within that, kind of, we said that it should be like in the valley. Like, if I owned a big, beautiful house in Marble, but then I wanted to rent as a teacher, like, that's different than if I'm trying to build equity on a house in Kansas or Indiana or wherever. That did come up in the conversation.
And I would like to offer a suggestion too, that one of the, aside from the housing committee having to have that conversation in the coming months, I also think that there are situations where, we have, somebody who owns a house and is renting to like people in the education world, teachers. And I think we need to be very mindful of like especially for thinking of our teachers, thinking of our situation here at home, like, is there a conversation to be had or an extra space where we can go deep into further of like somebody who's building generational wealth, somebody who's helping community, as opposed to like somebody who just has a really nice extra home in Marble. Yeah,
That's really good.
it's, they're different scenarios. And so I just wanted to make sure that that was brought up.
Who's next?
Sounds like a nightmare.
I'm a person like, generational wealth was beyond me, not what I have strived for, but I don't see why we would ask somebody to give up an asset that is not accessible to them here. So I don't think like.
I want to fund someone's second and third home purchase.
It's like,
That offends me as a
take it
taxpayer.
into account and for-
I can see that,
I
but
think it's me, then
it's-
Linda, then James.
But it's like, I don't see, they're superintendents, not priests. We're not asking them to take a vow of poverty, do you know what I mean? So it's like, I don't see why that's a necessary thing if it's not an accessible home to them physically.
So we baked that into staff housing because we thought if it was elsewhere, then that should be money that you could use to have a down payment in this valley, which is no longer the same as it was when we built staff housing guidelines, and maybe that needs to get revisited. I really like Jasmine's idea of like if you're renting it to repay your mortgage, but that also feels super complicated. I don't really want to dive into someone's tax records like that. I would propose that if it's equity investment, that house needs to be on the market so that they can use that. Or I guess it depends on what we have for the cap. Equity investment feels really complicated to me right now. If it's one of these, it can't be in the valley, 100% can't be in the valley, same as teacher housing. You can't move in if you have another house within the valley, even if it could be district boundaries. We wrote something in there that's like parachute Aspen. And then if it's outside the valley, I would give a superintendent more time, like 3 years to sell their house. Because that's a pretty, it's not that we're asking someone to take a route of poverty. They can have a nest egg, they could invest in something else, but.
Yeah, I get that, I'm saying, if it's in the valley, I totally get why, you know what I mean? But like outside in another state, it's-
I view it as, sorry.
No.
Someone who had to sell a home to be here, like, I did whatever I had to do to be here.
like,
Not-
totally.
Like if you're sitting on equity that can afford you a down payment here, you should cash that in and move here, not
But I
just
will also
continue
say,
to build it up.
Katie, Daisy.
So I just think that there's so much complexity to that because you're not necessarily sitting on the equity. You could be refinancing it and pulling equity out of the home to have the down payment to live here. And in terms of any income you're making from it, why wouldn't that just be accounted for in your income when you're reporting your income for qualifying for housing, like especially for the teacher housing? You know, I just feel like I don't, and this is not on topic of superintendent housing, but specifically for teachers, I just feel like that should be shifted because I don't think that it is benefiting our teachers. Like I feel like for them especially, like if they have to rent here, but they wanna buy a piece of land in, I don't know, Montrose, that they wanna move to when they retire because they wanna homestead or like, they should be able to do that. And if they're renting it, then they report that as income and that becomes part of their income.
Kenny, Daisy, Trinity, me.
Linda.
Sorry.
A couple thoughts I have on the superintendent's ownership of land. I think it's a big can of worms to open up about like, you own a house. Is it your mother who's living in that house? And now you have to sell out on your mother. Is it like, I mean, there's all these possibilities of what happens with that home that you own elsewhere. That's one thing that I think is hard to make that decision on making somebody sell or not if it is out of the district. A second thing that I think needs to be looked at is what we're finding is upon hiring a superintendent is we want the best quality candidate. The superintendent position comes with expectations on that position. And if there's 20 people applying and 12 of those people own a house, which is a good chance once you're in the superintendent position, and we're telling this superintendent that you need to sell your house to come take this job, and now we're down to 8 out of 20 that we're drawing from. And I think that's something that would limit our ability to get the best person for the position and put us behind in our recruiting process.
Yes, Daisy, then Linda, then James, and Trinity was in there.
Oh, we can't hear you, Daisy.
You're muted.
I'm gonna pause, I have a list, but I have a process question that may help us move forward. Are all these are our questions about home ownership primarily related to equity investment, thumbs up, or are they for all three, thumbs down?
Repeat.
So is all of these opinions we're having right now about home ownership in, like other home ownership outside the valley, are those primarily related to the equity investment idea, or are those related to all three?
Can I ask a process on that?
Yes,
If I feel that it's a,
you
It
can do
is,
whatever you want with your thumb,
but
James.
sideways, or I think for those options, I think it's sideways, what, like, as in they would need to sell while the staff policy is that, but once the staff policy changes, I feel like the superintendent policies can obviously change, so that's my sideways thumb.
You can show me your thumb and then you can have it, if you need to explain your thumb, you can.
Down is all three.
Thumb
I'm
up
not
is
voting.
it applies just to equity investment. Thumb down is it applies to all three, and so we need to continue discussing it before we can move forward right now.
I'm still confused what you're asking me.
Do you think that all these home ownership clauses,
Uh-huh.
is that
Like, can I own a home
primarily,
somewhere else?
yeah, is that primarily around equity investment? Or is that also just as relevant to buy and build? And James's thing, I think, is like, it's less relevant for buy and build, but still a little bit relevant.
It's very relevant while staff can't own a house elsewhere in the country,
that
but
changes.
if that changes, then I 100% think the superintendent should change at the same time.
And down is,
Down is
I
it applies
think it's
equal to all
only-
three.
oh, okay.
No.
Thumb up is it just as equity investment. Thumb down is all three.
I think I was there.
I think we're pretty split, huh?
Hey,
Okay. Jasmine, if you have an idea of how this works.
Well, I'm just offering a suggestion, because I think that this is obviously an important topic for the task force to have a discussion on. But I would say that just from my perspective and then reading comments, feedback and all of that, I don't know that it wouldn't pertain to a buy and a build. Because if we're offering, like, let's use Aspen as an example. If we're offering a home, right, where the superintendent can live, but they own a home in Parachute, I feel like that will be an issue for the community. And so I do think like we need to, I think it's important we have the discussion as it pertains just in general. Like in general, this what the task force, what would the preference be? And I want to preface saying also that I think there are many things, many conversations happening, including the fact that there are updates that, you know, we are hopeful will come to the housing committees as you guys are updating that work. Because, you know, this board and in conversations with staff have long been aware that home ownership in the valley and the fact that we just continue to build housing for teachers, but are not getting them into homes is a huge problem. So I think I just want to tie all that in and bring it back to say like, I think it's a very important conversation for you guys to have regardless.
I want to come back to the people on my list. Katie, you're on my list now.
No, it's okay.
And then I'm putting myself on the list after Katie for process ideas, because we have
Process ideas.
47 minutes. Linda,
I'm
you had
sorry.
your hand up forever and I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay, I say I'm not sure I'm answering the right questions then, but I guess I just feel like my general opinion is it should match what the teachers are, and if the teacher changes, I'd like the superintendent to change. I just feel like it's gonna be so hard on the teachers in the community if it doesn't mirror what we currently have to the teachers. I don't know how you sell that and say it's fair. But I have no problem with it changing, because I would love to see it change for everyone, but I feel like until we're there, like you said, we don't know what the teachers' ones are gonna be. So that's, and I also agree with Nathan, and Daisy, basically, as the head staff, related, it all just relates to, you know, the ownership thing. So the only other thing which is kind of jumping back is, I'm a little uncomfortable giving more than 20% to anyone for housing. I think that's what I meant with the did, and I don't mean to keep coming back to them, but they are way more sophisticated than any of us are in this whole process. And I just think there's a reason why you don't give more than 20% for anyone.
James, you were from a long time ago, maybe you're good now.
Most of it's been said, so I'm just going to skip that. But the one thing I do want to add was just to, so I think you came up and said the 3-year thing. I think based on what the consultants have said, HYA, Max, said that the average tenure of a superintendent nowadays is 3 to 4 years. So I think pushing anything out to a 3-year decision is, I just don't think that's wise, because I think that's almost pushing them out to like say, hey, well, I'll do my 3 to 4 years, keep my ownership or whatever, and then that's going to be my cutoff point because I don't want to sell my house. So, if it's, 12 months like it is for staff, like, you don't have to sell your house until you make it into staff housing, and then you have a year to sell. I feel if that's the current policy, I feel that it's quite a month, a year to sell your house feels reasonable as it stands with staff. Like, now if that changes for staff so they can keep their houses, I'm all for that. Outside of, obviously, the corridor here, but like, keep their house in Kansas, I'm all for that change. But I think pushing anything out to just 3 years or anything, when that's the tenure of the superintendent right now seems a bit risky that they're just gonna have a chance, they're gonna roll the dice and chance here.
Trinity, you dreamed of a long time ago.
Right, well, I'll just say that this is my least favorite option. You know, because it's not something that, it's got too many nuts and bolts, it feels really, you know. This has been always my favorite. But yeah, obviously, if somebody has something within the valley, whether you make it a mileage or whatever, but they shouldn't be accessing these things. If it's by, you know, if a district owns the house, then it goes into a teacher pool for them to rent, you know, that kind of situation. But also, it's the district's policy that they live within district. So it's like.
not a policy, it's not, but.
Okay, so that was my understanding,
It's a-
there you go.
Preference.
It's a preference, yeah. So yeah, if you're going to tell them like, your house is in Parachute, you know, I think it's fair to ask them if they're gonna be buying something, yeah, if it's already in the valley. You know what I mean, that makes sense. But we're also telling them, you know, sell your house, live within district. It's like, it's a lot of kind of mixed messaging there.
As I work down my list, I just want Alan and Krista at one point, so I want to pause for you guys to add your voices. Your voice in. It doesn't have to be right now, you can have a person to think.
Sure.
I just wanted to. Maureen, we'll go through Maureen and then.
Sure, all I wanted to say is that I think the sentiment of it needs to mirror the teachers' policies on housing and stuff, I completely agree with. But when is that gonna happen, right? And I don't know. I think we have the opportunity to set the standard with the superintendent one by using new policies that hopefully the teachers can adopt too, whenever that is. If we're doing, it's the same conversation we had in the first 2 meetings, that we're just kicking the can down the road and we're gonna be in the same spot, like we said earlier, in the same spot we were 2 months ago. But if we take the initiative, come up with these policies now, hopefully they're policies that are equitable enough, and having folks that can really represent the teachers in this space, can be like, hey, we did this for superintendent housing, it worked, we need to do this for the teacher housing. I think that's the approach to take in that aspect.
I agree with that. 2 really brief things. One, I'm wondering, because as Catherine and other people have pointed out, the whole ownership of a house can be so many different things. It could be somewhere family lives. It could be a house in somewhere where the house is valued at, you know, $75,000. It's not one size fit all. So I'm wondering if there's a different kind of wealth assessment that we could direct the board to take into consideration outside of home ownership and just scrap ownership, because it doesn't, to me, it's a meaningless kind of marker. Not always meaningless, but it doesn't show us what we actually are trying to figure out when we're trying to decide whether or not to support a house for a superintendent. The second thing is, I feel like there's so much potential for looking at the equity investment as an investment. We are likely to see a return on this. So even though it's complicated, we're not gonna make money off of this outside of over, you know, however many years before we decide to sell this house. This model, the equity investment model, we have the potential to make money a lot sooner that can then be folded back into teacher housing funds or other places. In particular, if we do some sort of higher percentage, I can't remember what it says in blue. The thing where we could recoup more than what we put in, essentially a higher percentage, 2 to 1 percentage of what we're recouping in terms of assets. It's just potentially a really great moneymaker over a much quicker time period than this. And so while it's complicated, while it's weird, it seems like this one's an investment. This is like offering something that we're not going to see a return on the investment anytime soon.
It's Katie, then Ben, then Nathan and James. With a Krista stop along the way.
Then you better stop talking, because I can't write all this down.
Would someone else like to take over doing that?
I'd be happy to take notes if you'd like to.
Discussion ensued, that's what it says.
I'm sure we can.
Okay.
Discussion ensued.
Lots of people talking.
Refer to recording.
Video.
Yeah, refer to video.
Hour
Refer to
two,
recording.
21
You don't have to put every word that everybody said.
You can just say at the 2-minute 11 mark on the video.
Okay, I'll just put that in there. Okay, thank you.
You're not a snob.
It was me, but I'm gonna pause. Ben?
So if the question on the table is still about sort of an asset test and a do you own other property test to qualify for either of these, I think these are such different programs that I see the equity investment one as more of a needs-based. Like, you can't make the payments on a house here, so we're gonna help you. So I do think some sort of asset and do you own other property test should apply to that. The buy or build, I really see totally different. Like, it's not wealth building, it's guaranteeing that we have a place for this person to live, so that there's not an issue of inventory. And therefore, I don't think this should have an asset or homeownership test. Maybe it's if you don't own a house in the valley. Like, I could still see that, but not getting into anything beyond that. Because if you have a home in the valley, you've got a place to land. I feel like the goal of buying or building a house is having a place to land. So that's my 2 cents on that.
As far as these not generating return, I mean, we're financing $17 million of COPs using this model right now. So there is an absolute return on those
Can you define COPs for us?
mortgages on the Meadowwood housing. So.
So we are making money.
If the person's paying rent, assuming that they're paying rent.
Yeah.
then
Oh,
that-
gotcha,
They
okay.
pay lots of
Gotcha,
money.
gotcha, yeah. Okay, fair. James?
Great,
I was
thank you.
Just, I
And then
was actually
process.
gonna, 2 things I was gonna say, what Nathan said was, we'll ask the question, because I believe that is how we were making a good chunk of money to pay for stuff. On this one, for your question about making money on it, I have a question for you, I guess, is when the money comes out of it, the superintendent buys out the district, now are you seeing that money goes into the staff option to fund into that? Or are you seeing that we're gonna have to retain a portion of that and invest it as a district to make sure that, let's say, that superintendent stays for 8 more years after they bought out the district, that there is a fund pool in 8 years to help the next superintendent with the program? Because if we give the money into the staff program, there is very much potential in 8 years from now, when we switch superintendents, let's say, that there would be no money left in the finances to help the next superintendent. So like, to me, when the money comes out of this, it can't be spent. It has to sit, and there's a potential if it sits too long, that it won't match the investment of what's needed for the next superintendent, because all of a sudden we might have 380 grand sitting in the bank, but 20% in 8 years might be $500,000, and all of a sudden the district is short, and if we don't have, a sound CFO and a board that's been financially sound for a few years, or there's pandemic or whatever reasons, we might not have those funds to support the next superintendent and the one after that. So I actually feel that there's more money to be made, like as in capital out that can be reused out of these two. Maybe not, on paper, that will probably make us look rich, potentially.
I'm gonna pause us for a second. Here's what I'm hearing us say. These feel better to move forward with an added piece that that you can't own a residence within the Roaring Fork Valley. Whether that's district boundaries or Roaring Fork Valley is a question. There are a couple of there's questions on here that we have not explored that are small questions. But this one, from what I'm hearing, we have a lot more questions about like max and 20% and how do we build that in a way that it's equitable and not helping someone who has the assets that can get matched. And we have more questions about a needs assessment or an assets assessment of the superintendent. Am I accurately matching what we're thinking? My proposal, time-wise, and this doesn't feel great based on what we all talked about for consensus and menu for the board at the beginning, is that we feel mostly good to go ahead on these. We don't feel in consensus to go ahead on that. And that we need to think about what is gonna be our does not feel like we're gonna get to that tonight on equity investment. So we need to think about what is our process moving forward? How do we refine these? Not necessarily right now, but thinking about how does that happen? How does that get refined? And again, knowing that like, these are just recommendations, and if the board chooses, they could go ahead with it without our clarifications. Do we feel like we wanna dive into each of these right now more, or do we wanna think about how are we gonna dive into them more? It is 7:25.
I can talk about general, because it's about that. Like, we need
I'm
to
making notes.
write a paragraph, we need to write a letter, we need to write something that says, this is what the task force recommends. And that's what we need to do before we leave. So that gives us 35 minutes to do that. We can talk about these more I think
Until I grow a beard.
I mean, I think we could continue talking about them, we've been talking about them, but I don't know if we're going to solve any of the fine details. So we as a task force just need to say, these are our recommendations, and like we said before, these can be multiple, these can be things that are not even here about the top 3, like, these were all the ones we explored. No, but like, we can say the whole process, like, this is what we started with, this is what we found. Our top 2 are this because of blank. This could be another recommendation, as well as all these other ones we've explored. However, we would need more people to do that.
And I feel like,
Since you guys are the task force, would you prefer that the board take notes? Help you draft?
I mean, I would,
Yeah, I don't think we're quite there yet. Hang on, we have Maureen, then me, and then Ben.
just really quickly, I really like how you phrase that, because I feel like it seems like we could say, we see these as 2 good options. We see this as a potential option if we have some clarity on X, Y, and Z.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Like, it's okay for us to write in this. We believe in parts, we believe in the equity investment model, but we are not ready to make recommendations about it.
I would just say that in the interest of time, and I like where this is going with that, I think we can do it this amount of time if we break into groups and like, somebody write up the bill paragraph, somebody write up the by paragraph, somebody write up the concerns we have there, and maybe somebody else starts kind of an intro or
History,
something like that. And we, it's all in one Google Doc on different pages, and then we merge it together or whatever. And
Yeah.
we're done.
And,
Sorry.
Well, next.
And if there's follow-up
Linda
work that
James.
needs to be done, I can do that.
And I know, I don't want to beat it to death, but I do just have one question on equity investment. I personally would never do it. Like, I would never want to put in, but know that you're giving me $1 and you get 2 back. Do you guys think that?
But we don't have to decide
can I
that.
No, I know we don't have to
Question,
decide it, but I was just curious, like the board, like it's an idea you guys brought together. What, do you think it's something that people, it's just it's just gone through my head.
I think that's a questionable one, and I also think the one that says the homeowner gives what, the 2-to-1 match, that was an idea, I don't know that that's like.
I mean, I
So-
want it because if the school's gonna give money, I want them to get 2 to 1, but I'm just saying from the other side of the perspective. I do think the school does not get 1 to 1 back. I think they should get at least 2 to 1.
Linda, can I clarify your
Okay.
question?
Right.
Your question is, would a candidate act, it's not that, you're not saying that
Right.
you don't support it, you're wondering if a candidate would
With
want it.
support. Personally, I do think the school should get something for doing it because we're never gonna build a program if we don't, but I just curiously.
I think that they would want it, if they have no other options outside of spending $1 bajillion to rent. This is a good option, or you're guaranteed some in return.
Even Calvin's son of mine is just different, but I was just curious. So
Yeah,
that's
but
good to
I
know.
also think it's like buy-in on their part, you know, like, this is your school district now.
Yeah.
Like, are you willing to invest?
Okay, thank
James
you.
is up next.
That's helpful, thank you.
Just gonna say on the process, I think after we write these, I think we should come back, park that till the end. Let's do these 2 first, because I feel like we might get somewhere on these 2. I very much feel that this, even no matter what we write, is gonna get back into this
Agreed.
conversation, and we're gonna end up with no consensus on that. So let's, after we write them, I say let's start with build and buy, so there's at least a recommendation. If we don't come to consensus on that, we can just write, there is no consensus yet on equity investment.
So we will split into 3 groups with a board member in each group again. Board members can help be our secretaries.
So everybody's just
Start
getting a
sessions.
document for each.
No.
I think Chris is
It's
right.
already linked in the notes.
Oh,
So there is a superintendent housing task force final recommendations document. Everyone should be able to open it, everyone should be able to edit it. It's linked in the notes.
Not wrong.
Just, sorry. One more process, I'm like, splitting up is all good, and it might make getting back slightly quicker, but because 2/3 of the people won't be involved in it, will it end up making it longer than if we just sat?
I think we've already talked about it so much that we're good to go.
Okay, well, we haven't really talked about either of these 2 yet. Because there's a whole lot like rent, there's a free option on the buy.
But that's just
I
recommendations.
I have a process idea. Let's do a quick list of 5 on some of the things on here that might be controversial, so that we can then say, we have a question, we'd like to explore this part more, we'd like to explore this part more, we recommend this part. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay,
you get it.
let's, so 5 is like, yes, definitely 100%, 0 is, I cannot go forward if that is in there. And then you can be anywhere along the way, if you're a 1 or a 2, I may ask you to explain yourself. Or if we have enough 1s or 2s, that becomes, that we have a question about this. modest, possibly defined by less than 3,000 square feet. Ones and twos, I'm wondering, is that related to that, is definition of modest something that we just need to look at? Or is your ones and twos about the idea of modest being in there?
For me, it's the definition of modest.
Same.
Nathan?
I just think it's too that we do this.
Okay,
It's too much.
Too in the weeds for this.
are
week.
you okay, Nathan, with the word modest?
I mean,
Which
I
can be
think that-
interpreted by the board
it's
however
just
they
too-
want?
Yeah, like, what's an appropriate house?
Okay.
It's in best district plan.
District boundaries. Great. Ellen, I can't hit your hands if you're one or two, just like, throw your hands around. This is like an ideally, something a strong recommendation. Ideally
underneath.
Mid-Valley.
That's underneath, I think district boundaries is like includes
Yeah, they're
that.
different.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think Mid-Valley, that's a board, to me, that's in the weeds game. Within the district, I think it's.
Straight in. 3 to 4 bedrooms stays, that's also with that modest definition, so it's like. Occupant pays all costs if that, we don't pay taxes, but if there are HOA and utilities.
But
This
there's
kind of
taxes
goes-
if we buy a house, there's not taxes if we build a house in district line.
Those we don't,
Oh, we don't.
we don't have.
Any taxes will come right back to the, most of my taxes go to us anyway.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that
Yes.
before we vote? Is that occupant pays all costs if it is rent-free, or is that occupant pays all costs if they're paying rent anyway?
Regardless, you should be paying.
Let's go regardless, because that's the easier one to agree
And
on.
add regardless then.
So the way our current program works is for the buildings that have HOAs, we collect the rent and then we pay the HOA, that's just part of the rent.
And also though, like, so why our group put this out there was when Iron Bridge, we originally paid the HOA fee that included the gym, that got split out. And now staff who live in the Iron Bridge housing, if they want the gym, they can pay that extra. And so I wanted to make sure that if we were buying a house with it, that came like RVR, that anything extra they'd be paying for.
And also because if it is a rent-free situation, that's part of their contract, they would still be responsible for that on top of,
James, are you a one or do you have a point?
I'm a one.
Why are you a one?
I don't think we should ask the superintendent to pay all those things if they're paying rent. I think the HOA for privilege like swimming pool or gym, 100% agree with that, that's a 5. But I don't think we should ask the superintendent to pay for those things if we're not asking staff to pay for them.
Do staff pay, they don't pay utilities?
Well, so,
That's all it is.
That's the-
we're going to decide,
It's
well, we're
whether
gonna
or not
make rules out.
HOA is included in rent or is separate, and we go into just the rent costs, so HOA is on top of it. Staff, occupant pays utilities and HOA on top for extra amenities, how are we feeling
Yeah,
about that?
that's fine.
Great. Generally, look for a newer and lower maintenance house, and then I'm gonna go Daisy. So yeah, I guess that goes rent. Are we all ready to include that, this to 5, or is it the one here would be like, this is gonna be a question that we want to explore more?
So it's like 5 is they pay rent.
5 is they pay rent, 1 is we need to explore it more, 3, 4 is like it needs some details worked out. I think we seem like some questions around it, around like how much it'll be and all that, but it seems like we're kind of in agreement on that.
We've avoided some discussion on the issue.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, so it has to be recorded.
ADA accessible. We are buying a house.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You can make it
Cost us
ADA
something to get it
accessible.
done.
There's a fifth last one over there.
I mean, I'm a one or a fist on that one, just inventory so slim, if you're waiting for an ADA accessible house to come on the market, you're never gonna find it.
Okay, saving to renovate?
Can I answer that one?
Yes.
It's, we would have the commit to ADA accessible, whether the house is already, or we have to make it an adjustment to it, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, that,
That's
it's a
Great.
compliance thing.
Yeah.
because I feel, somebody correct me, some of the staff housing is ADA, so I feel like.
A
Yes, but I
percentage
think-
of the ones
Yeah.
they build are ADUs.
So I think Trinity's right. Yeah, I don't think it has to be, but it has to, the funding has to be there to make it compliant before before tenant unit initially.
Okay, final one on here, 5 to 5 on this one, I think this is one we're probably gonna be 2s and 3s on, not to exceed 1.25 million, or does that just go with this modest? Or cross it out and I'll go with modest?
I think it goes along.
Modest.
But it's a specific amount.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a hard one to put a limit on.
So let's say, I think what we say in the writing is we encourage the board to define what modest means.
Some of our ideas include 2 to 3 bedroom, or, 3 to 4
Yeah.
bedroom, less than 1.25 million, under 3,000 square feet.
Within a range of median.
Or maybe just something like targeting the middle of the current market. Like,
Yeah.
That way at any point, it's not the
Yeah.
highest, it's not the lowest.
Yeah, 1.25 million actually could be the highest house. If in 3 years, then the houses are done.
Yeah.
Just like if you're buying a house, you have to buy a house that could, it's gonna work, anybody that's single or a family of 6 or more, like you have to, it has to be able to fit
Yeah.
80, 90, 100% of who you could potentially hire.
Yeah.
So to say that you're limiting it to 1.25, if that's in Willits, that's a 2-bed, 1-bath,
Yeah.
900 square foot condo, which.
I mean, I think Max was really good at making it, like, it's about appearances with the modest, right? It's not even as much about like being good stewards of taxpayer funds. And this sounds weird, and I'm saying this on YouTube, but I'm aware of that. It's about appearing that we are good stewards of taxpayer funds, that this person who's moving into this housing is not excessively benefiting any more than any of our staff members.
We're not getting them in a city.
Yeah.
They're in a normal.
Okay, I'm gonna keep moving us through here.
I know, right?
Yes, please.
I know.
Here, we have the same question about modest, here's some more idea about definitions.
Mirror whatever's on my.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Nathan really
Include, I
highlighted
include
that.
that in there.
Nathan, when we were working on this, really highlighted that it should be about finishings and about the square footage, but not necessarily about the better mass, because you do want a house that works for whoever the superintendent is.
Flexible.
We recommend if we build, we're on our own land.
We left off the pet friendly situation.
Is that the back? That's on this one.
Yeah, it's on that one.
Okay, so some of these I think also overlap and we can go
I think-
together.
So just to Daisy's point, I think if we say it mirrors the staff requirements, then that's fine, because staff are allowed to have pets.
That's- yeah.
So,
5 to 5, use existing land that is RFSD owned. We're building a house. Ben did have one point that I think is important, that's on here, but it kind of like is in between buy and build. If a developer is building something new and wants to partner with us, as buying a house that's being built, so I don't really know where that goes on here. James, you're a 2 and Nathan, you're a 2 on this.
Just think it limits our options for potentially areas that we don't make any sense. We want to build a house that doesn't make sense that people don't know.
I'm 100% with Nathan on that, and I also feel that using land, we need to make, if we do use district-owned land, that it cannot reduce the potential for that land, i.e. we don't give up a 20-unit potential to build 1 unit. I would rather pay more money to buy a plot of land than give up the potential.
Proposal, could I just move buying land and building on it into the buy category?
Fine.
It's kind of a combo.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think build is, like, it's part of that is where do you build the property.
What if one sentence in each of these is another option we want the board to keep in mind is buying land and building on that land? Does that sound good?
I think for me, as long as it says that that we don't utilize land that has greater potential than 1 unit.
Well, we said it's best suited for a single family.
Yeah, okay, as long as that's in there, then I'm comfortable.
So just to get some, it's like all this out here is district owned land. And there's somewhere I've seen, what's that?
The beautiful field.
Yeah, the field, but
50 units.
My backyard.
But at some point, I've seen like a sketch when this is totally built out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, could we subdivide that Would that be like,
Yeah,
we subdivided into a 7,000 square foot lot that makes sense for
Yeah,
a house, as
yeah.
opposed to like, oh, no, we could have actually built that. I just-
No, I'm 100% with that. And then maybe I don't own a house, I don't get into zoning here, so maybe something tricky, but what I'm against is, let's say we subdivided the 7,000 square foot lot. Okay, that removes naturally whatever was gonna be built there, but does that stop you potentially building the rest of the development? That's what if that stopped the other 80,000 square feet that's at the back there being developed, that's why the two. But taking 7,000 square feet of that property and building on it, 100%, that's fine. I appreciate the clarification.
If we build, it should be ADA compliant. And I'm gonna try and start like moving that fast, guys. Great, that's a check. Collaborate with district housing committee on design plans and processes. Or just make it similar. District housing committee, guys, doesn't do that.
I think, sorry, can I just clarify what we wrote this for? This was a checks and balances, so like if the board is building, that the board's final plans need to go to the housing committee for like a final
We
sign
don't
off to
do
say
that for
that
staff
it's,
housing though.
say it's like comparable. So
Who does this stuff? Because we were just looking for some way so that one person and like one committee is not, so if the board is like, yeah, let's get this 7,000 square foot house, then that person or that committee could say, that's a little much. As well as if the board is like, yeah, let's buy this $200,000 house because we really don't like the superintendent or whatever, then the other person or the other collaborator could be like, actually, they
That's
deserve
not-
something
yeah.
better.
like it's,
So maybe there needs to be input gathered, an input gathering process.
yeah,
Does that sound good?
something to protect the superintendent from either getting screwed in like a 2-bedroom shack, and the district taxpayers not funding a 7-bedroom mansion.
Okay,
Like,
input gathering.
Yeah, that's kind of.
Okay, I'm gonna keep moving on.
Yeah, oh, fair enough, like,
Community donations of time and materials. That's,
We said, do you need more?
no, we just want this to five.
Okay.
We got some zeros. Trinity?
I don't see why that would be a necessity.
yeah.
Yeah, we can say question about.
Trying to get donated materials.
That can go in the paragraph as a question about community donations. Can be a time constraint and there's bureaucracy involved. That's just like a pro and con, I don't think it needs to go in our paragraph.
Yeah.
I think we can identify pros and cons in the paragraph.
Should we be identifying pros and cons in the paragraph?
Like,
Not a recommendation, I don't think.
Yeah,
No,
No? Okay.
it's something we have to consider when taking this up.
And I think we've already done that, Maureen, could you
Okay.
validate your
With
point
the
with
SWOT.
like with the analysis that we did?
That's fair, okay. Again, this is the pro and a con, and we also do oversee building processes a lot. What is this is the rent, so same thing as the other, we suggest that rent be charged, we have questions about, or there's more work to be done on what that rent would look like.
So actually on there, it suggests it's just the category 5, 3-bedroom price.
What if housing committee revisits that?
Then it goes up. I mean, it's tied to housing committee, it fits within our current practices, it honors our current structures.
I think that should be for both, that the rent should be tied to the housing committee rental thing, so it's not, it's the housing committee makes the rent.
This is
That's on
fine.
there too, right?
Sign is, okay, perfect.
This was this other idea, partnering with a developer who is currently building. Maybe that just goes on here as another idea we have that could be explored more is,
So build it by.
it's kind of, it goes by build and buy.
I think, again, that's like, if the board were to choose build, it becomes incumbent upon staff, which is probably Ben and I, like, what are options to build?
yeah.
So really, you're just gonna make it.
Well, no, but it's like, what are our options?
You're gonna present the board with a list, right?
Yeah, I mean, we get approached all the time with like, hey, if you throw in all this money, well, and it's like, we look at it, but, usually it's just they want us to, they think we have a ton of money to invest in a bunch of things.
Okay, this one with the other one, this is just a plus, a pro con. This is kind of a pro con, that's a pro, no HOA.
Or is it saying like not to build in an HOA?
I wrote that, and I think it was that, the pro was that there was no HOA and that we could include maintenance fees and if we weren't gonna charge rent, then we would need a maintenance fee.
But can that be something that we say, if we build it, it has to be somewhere where there's no HOA, so there's no additional cost?
If we build on district land,
Yeah,
then that's there. If we do a build and buy, then that's,
yeah, kind of.
then that kind of goes back to that HOA over there,
Or HOAs that we would,
probably.
Yes,
Yeah,
there's-
so like, we don't need that, like,
And then
There's
back
HOAs
here, where like
inside.
the HOA fee would be there, but any amenities would be on their website. Pet friendly, just 5. If we're following
yeah.
if we're following staff housing guidelines, we're pet friendly. Do we wanna do the same thing over here, or do we just wanna write down the questions we have over here? Yes, sorry, Jasmine and James.
Sorry, I just want to clarify again, and I'm so sorry, I feel like I've asked this question twice already. We do not have a HOA for our housing, right?
We know, it depends on the housing you're in.
Not in Carbondale, but in Lawrence, yes.
Iron Bridge and Willits have HOAs.
It's like not on the ones where we built it on our land,
Right,
but the
okay.
ones where we partnered with the developer.
right, that's why we wrote that, was because we had said, like, if we build it on our land, we don't have to do an HOA.
Yeah, it was
Right,
a-
okay, thank
So that's
you.
something we should include.
But again,
But
but
we're in a neighborhood where
you don't
there
land a
is.
tree farm, you don't
Right,
land a
right,
blue lake, and they may just say, no, you're building here, like.
Yeah,
you've got
right,
these-
part of
Yes.
I don't think this is a restriction, this was a possible advantage.
Yeah.
James,
Just on the can be a time constraint one, I'm wondering if a recommendation for that is if the board goes down the build option, that they're entitled to offer a unit of Meadowwood when that comes online until the build is finished, so we can support the current superintendent.
Vista 5 on James's addition. Nathan?
I just, I feel like getting just in the weeds and
Not our thing to say.
it's kind of negotiating with the superintendent, which is what we would like to do.
Maybe that's something we could write as one option, that's a possibility.
I'm not saying that's to take it, but I just feel like
If we're
that's gonna
building
be a
Meadowwood,
couple
also
years.
still has to be built.
Yeah, if it's a
so-
recruiting tool, I see what you're saying, and it's not the
Yeah, and we
same.
can't kick someone out of staff housing and do this.
Right, so I mean, if that just doesn't really make any sense to me, because Meadowwood still has to be built also, so we're also looking at
This is
building.
true.
But
I mean,
maybe
it could be
it's
placed
not
on
Meadowwood,
Meadowwood, but.
maybe it's, they have first right of refusal on a staff housing,
On a
next
staff
staff
house.
housing unit that comes available
In the
until that in the interim. Yes.
I feel like we got this hammered out, it's just typing it up,
Yes.
this could happen after this
And
meeting.
Ben already typed it up.
Me and Katie are on that.
And this one, my suggestion
I
is,
had 0.337,
right?
And just-
I suggest on this one, we make lists of our things that would need to be explored.
So things being total amount, or like number amount versus percentage amount.
Versus eligibility conditions or.
Yeah. So like our first question that would need to be explored on this is whether or not we want to establish the financial need.
Financial need via wealth assessment.
Vista 5, is that something that needs to be like significantly explored, or is that something we believe in? So like 0-1 is that needs to be significantly explored if someone's gonna move, if we want to recommend this option. 4 or 5 is like, I want that in the recommendation right now.
I'm confused.
Sorry.
If we go with equity investment, do we wanna say in our recommendation, you must explore, like, hey, board, you must explore the need via a wealth assessment. If you are doing a 4 or 5, you're saying that. If you are doing a,
Wait, let's actually do that, Krista, because I think I messed up with Vista 5. Let's just do a thermometer. Yes, that should be explored. Thumbs down, that should just be an A.
What?
no, now you're opposite. So if you agree with what I just said about, hey, board, if you're gonna go with an equity investment, you must explore, is it needed via a wealth assessment? If you agree with that, you're either a 4 or 5.
I get what
If
I-
you think that that's ridiculous, they should be able to have equity investment no matter what, you should be voting a 1 or a 0 on this. Ready, fist to 5?
Hold
We had different questions, I get it now.
on. That's fine, but I don't think I'm ready to start saying like this list on this to 5 on options list, because I don't think I'm ready to say on the overall equity investment, that I'm comfortable enough to say put that into a recommendation.
I agree, this was just one that I thought that maybe we all wanted in there. And but I phrased it totally wrong. So my question to you guys, I'm gonna rephrase my question. Do we all want a needs assessment in this one? Or are we not sure if that needs to be in there?
Yes.
Do you know what needs to be in there?
So now we're doing yes or no, not
Yes or no.
specify.
And
Yes,
then,
must be in the equity investment.
That's a pretty strong preference.
only place where I'm like,
Do I have fresh paper?
Do you want a fresh piece of paper?
Consider financial need, okay.
No, because Ben's taking good notes.
Ben's basically got the
I'm
whole
writing on it.
document.
I'm just
Our
gonna like cross
recommendation.
these off to
We're
make sure
gonna
I
have to
can.
review it, read it, and sign it.
sorry. And are you also taking our drink orders?
This is not.
So is this questions for future conversation, or is this a recommendation, we're picking what we want for a record, because as I said, I'm not.
The task force recommends further exploration of.
The task
Equity
force,
investment.
the task force is not, here's a potential phrasing that I don't know if you've already written this.
It's already on there.
Will you read us what you wrote?
This was the most complicated option explored by the task force with no consensus reached on the details. The task force recommends further exploration of a needs assessment, limitations on existing home ownership, and varying other items.
Nothing else yet.
Whether it's, I'm gonna open up to you guys, what other questions you see on here that need to be explored more?
The return, whether it's a 2-to-1 return or a 1-to-1 return.
Whether we increase our equity stake, is that how we phrase that?
Sure.
Or whether we get an increased return from what we put in.
I think also the percentage versus total amount.
Cross off the things we talked about. We just talked about this one.
Thank you.
So I'm crossing it out. Crossing that out. Alan, will you say yours again?
Yeah, so if an investment is made, is the investment total quantified by a number amount or a percentage amount related to the cost of the home? Or the cost of whatever they can afford, I don't know.
Yeah, well, the cost of the home, basically. You take that into consideration. Or is it like, this is the max we can give? You know what I mean?
So I'm hearing you guys saying, Ben, I don't know, you've already captured, maybe you should,
I apologize if I mumbled.
is our max output determined by a percentage of home cost or a number?
Okay, looks like Kenny's got that.
I think we had a question about whether this is a matching thing. And if so, what that ratio is.
So I think our goal is to make home occupancy, whether it's rental or owning, affordable. And by saying it's 20%, you potentially don't meet that objective. That it's never affordable for anybody. You have to be willing to push your down payment to the 30, 40, 45% range to make payments affordable and accessible.
And would that be better quantified as a number or the percentage?
A number.
A number?
I agree with you that it wouldn't be affordable if it was capped at percent. I think what we've heard concerns about and places to explore more than looking at you here is whether we feel comfortable authorizing someone to have half their home paid for by the district.
I think that's where that needs assessment plays a role, maybe. You know, like, so if they have 400,000, then it needs to stick to the percentage or whatever, if it's.
That's where this one gets so complicated.
I think it's also though where that if we have a higher percentage of our return comes in, that motivates people that have the finances to just invest them themselves.
The people who don't need it wouldn't be.
Right.
Nathan and Linda.
Yeah, I'm just.
I feel like this one is much more, we're trying to define the sandbox so that the board can do stuff inside. Whereas this was a lot easier to, here are the things we'd like to see, like, this is more like, stay within your life, don't invest more than $400,000, don't, like, but it's gonna have to take a lot more, it'll be much more negotiated with.
Right.
They can't do everything.
I'm sorry, because I wasn't clear. Are we in any kind of agreement about getting some additional return or not?
That needs to be explored.
Exponentially, so returns. From my perspective, and just in response to what Nathan just said, like, what I feel like would be very helpful is to say, we expect that there is a term that creates a return on investment for the district. You don't have to get into the nitty-gritty of exactly what it is, but there's an expectation that there's a return on investment. There's an expectation that the district recoups, at least it's investment plus equity in some right? There are these expectations that these terms are included in an ultimate contract, but I feel like you guys are spending a lot of time trying to figure out what exactly the terms would be, and that's,
Like, we're really here until like, we're trying to negotiate before
Yes.
there's like.
right, before,
negotiate with.
yeah, with yourself.
We're trying to create the conditions under which can be negotiated.
I like the way that was phrased.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I like that.
One wondering though, that I have though, one responsibility I feel to the community is there was this like sticker shock, right? And so I think the community would really appreciate if we, and I know that like, this feels backwards because we aren't capping other things because we want to be responsive to market value. So we cap it at like 1.5 times the superintendent's salary. Just so like this, like I think there's this feeling of responsive, that was a big sticker shock, and I don't know how to cap that in responsible.
Well, I feel like the way Nathan explained it was so, was spot on, right? That 20% doesn't enable someone just to, like, the goal is to enable a person to have it own.
So if $450,000 is 20% of like 2.3 million. I don't think they're gonna buy a 2.9 unless they've got
Yeah.
a spouse income that's huge. Like, I just think there's other limiting factors.
Yeah.
To,
I agree with you, and I want the community, like, I want the community to feel like we are measuring that use of funds and we avoid that sticker shock, and I don't know how to phrase that.
But the thing is, that's why we can't get into a consensus with this, do you know what I mean? So it's like, we have to put that in there, like, one of the reasons we can't is because we can't decide this.
That makes sense.
well, I think the other thing is that, and I still hear this, is they thought that was a handout. It was $500,000 you're gonna sell it, we're gonna get that.
Yeah.
And the superintendent's gonna take that 500,000, it's like,
Right.
no, it was never perceived as an equity investment, that the district still has this portion of money, we get it back and put it to use again. Like, I just think there's a lot of things that made the sticker shock. Primarily, we're just handing out.
I think it wasn't necessarily the number, it was just what
I
people.
think it was
ran with.
a combination, because we didn't have the details ironed out, saying we will get 500 plus some return back.
Catherine,
James has his hand up,
can Catherine repeat what she says? We can. write
yeah, and then I'm
down.
kind of trying to.
I blacked out, I don't know what happened.
Let's rewind the video.
Yay.
At what point, okay.
James?
I was gonna say, there is not consensus yet on this, on what comes first, the staff program or the superintendent or the same time.
That's a good point to put in there.
I mean, that's hard to include because that's not our recommendation. Our job is superintendent task force.
Right.
We cannot tie our
That's what the
recommendations
staff program
to,
will be.
like, you don't know the
My
staff.
We can
recommendation is
recommend
this
a
will be
timeline.
done after the staff program.
Then why wouldn't this be done after the staff program?
Because there's already buildings that are rental for staff. So this to me matches what staff currently have.
Oh, okay, so you're saying just the equity investment could be tied to when that is rolled out for stock?
Correct.
Okay.
So staff roll out either at the same time or staff comes first and then this rolls out the next week or
I mean,
whatever.
but this might not even be, to Ben's point, all options are on the table right now. This may not be what comes out of the housing task force.
Which is
That's what I was
better,
trying to say.
which might mean that we mirror the superintendent's more to what comes out of that, if that's a better option. Or a more equitable option.
I think, can we put in what James said, because I have heard multiple people say that, and again, that's a,
So
we're
equity
just saying that
investment
we
could be
aren't
tied
in
to-
consensus on
Well,
it.
there's
No,
no
no, no,
consensus
There's
on
no
when,
consensus.
on if, what comes first, the staff program or the superintendent program, or if they come at the same time.
Or if there will even be a program that the housing committee first.
And I think because to me.
Which one informs the other is
Yeah.
what you're trying to say.
And also
Yes,
to
it is.
manage expectations, because there are so many staff that are seeing this and hearing about, oh, there's gonna be a staff program. We start throwing numbers around like 400,000. I'm telling you now, staff are thinking, well, come December, I'll be able to qualify for a $500,000.
And we're gonna try.
And that's not gonna happen because we've looked at finances, like, or it happens for 3
I'm
staff.
gonna pause
So
you
it's not
guys,
gonna be
because
appropriate.
it's 8 p.m.
It is.
Are there other things that we are either in consensus on or not in consensus on that need to get added? Maureen?
I think we can probably be in consensus about the house having to be in district.
Yes.
About there being a need to ensure down market protection. I think just something as basic as that we can put in. And
I think all the others are.
And the pre-qualification.
on an equity investment, we don't need to have ADA compliance.
That's true. That's.
And the pre-qualification, that it named as a
That was the
pre-qualification.
third one I was looking for.
And so as Julia's point, because of
Linda had her
district
hand up,
level,
though.
oh,
I'm
sorry,
sorry.
Yeah, I guess the only reason I bring up the in-district is because if we are gonna have the teachers doing two, I feel like they should be able to live in Newcastle if they want to, so I hate to put that restriction. But I know people want the superintendent. I just put that
Yeah, I
out
think
there.
we
No, no, I think that's,
It's a good point.
that is a very good point, actually.
But that would be a
Staff buy out
housing.
in Newcastle, which is gonna be really.
I don't mind requiring the superintendent to be in district and not requiring staff to be in district.
Yeah.
And we are,
I don't know. I just-
So let's just not worry about that for now, and I know it's separate.
It's not in the contract, so it's great.
Yeah, I mean, on this
So I don't
one,
know
they
if
can
you
buy
guys-
wherever they want, because it's like, it's their
Yeah.
home, this one, it's the district's home, so.
But I think you guys should.
But we agree on the down market, like.
We might.
No,
Sorry.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was just
I
like
mean,
a-
because
like, that's
to
not-
your point though, we don't want somebody to
Hang
live.
Hang on, guys, we got multiple conversations.
We don't want somebody to live like.
Grand Junction, yeah.
I think we also, it's
That's
not
an
all
agreement.
Little House has to be in district. For the
Can we
superintendent.
can we expand the definition of in-district to the Roaring Fork Valley?
No.
You can?
No,
Glenwood
Within
to
where
Basalt.
schools are.
West
Within where
Glenwood, that's Canyon Creek
Okay,
through,
Woody Creek.
Lazy,
Lazy Glen.
Easy Glen, and that's up here.
no, Lazy Glen is Basalt.
So,
Old Snow West.
We'll go through the entry level this way. Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay.
And then I think we should include a requirement for some sort of maintenance standards.
Justify on maintenance standards.
Huh?
I understand it more. I think it,
So
can we
we
say
can
it needs to be
track that.
explored? The
Okay,
maintenance standards needs to be explored. Is that okay with you, Nathan?
And kept in good repair.
I don't think we wanna get into the semantics of that right now, just maintenance standards needs to be explored and discussed.
So,
Linda,
did you address down market protection? Because I'd like us to have that in our, we
Is it on there?
is that
It's on there? Okay, thank you.
So, two things, Kendall. We need to make sure that because people are typing on this document and Google keeps track of who's typing, that it's brought out that you were taking notes based on the conversations that were happening here. As well as we all need to add our names to the bottom after we've read it. And it says what we need to say, or what we wanted to say here.
They're not paragraphs right now, they're bullets.
No, and I think bullets are fine.
better. James,
It's more legible.
yeah, James.
So I was gonna say, as process,
Process things only right now.
as process, should we nominate somebody to tidy up this recommendation? And then give, so it's in a more written format, and then give all the task force members, including the ones that aren't here tonight, let's say a week to add suggestions that we can talk back and forth in the document. And then at the end of that week, or that, whatever that time frame is, then we go, right, that's it, you stick your name at the bottom if you're with it, and they get sent to the board. So there's like a deadline.
I would like to push for less than a week.
Okay, I just said a week for a
Yeah,
quantifiable, but it's outside.
process recommendations that you all copy and paste this into a new document that just your task force has access to, not board members. So it's very clear to the community that the board do not edit and change your recommendation.
I strongly encourage people who are not I think there's 4 folks who are not here today. I know it's super annoying to watch the video and see the discussion, because I feel like there's so much good discussion that happened that changed my mind on things.
And I
Alright, another point, Maureen, could we look at those 4 people and each find a person that we are, like, that we're in communication with and that we wanna reach out and find a time to talk to that person? And talk them through what we wrote down, and that way they don't have to watch the 4 hours, but we can like talk to them.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine with me, those people all have contact with somebody. Alternatively, you
Let's-
can like put things at 2 times speed and watch it go fast, just.
I'll highlight them in
Can we,
orange.
let's assign them to us.
Can I guess as the person that
What?
spoke with everybody, that wasn't gonna be here today, is there one person that can reach out to everybody? The contact info, their email and phone numbers are on here, so I think
Sorry, Jasmine, which document are you on?
the contact list. Do you want me to send it to you again?
No, I can find it, I just needed to know which document you were in. So the 4 people we're looking for are Angela, Lisa, Lori, and Tim. I'll take Lisa.
Tag them, I mean, who else is tagging?
Well, what she was saying is there somebody you could just call for?
I think that's so much easier.
I think I would say 1-to-1. I just
agree
feel like
with that.
putting 4 on one
I
person
think
is a lot.
Okay.
Having like that telephone meeting with board members.
Well, I defer to the task force
Yeah.
to decide, but I think sooner rather than later, obviously, would be
You said you'd take Lisa? I can take anyone, I'm fine.
You could take the
And Scott Angela.
Lori, who
I'll
else?
take Lisa and Lori.
Lori and Tim.
And Tim.
I can also take Lori. I'll take two. I have a film like tomorrow, so.
I can try to get Tim too, then, if anybody else, I can do his lunch.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Awesome.
So we've got it typed up, I think good enough to sign off on. My only hesitation is actually, right now, we just made it anybody with a link can edit, but that can open it up to people. I don't think we need to actually be editing it. We just need a way to collect,
Just
like,
comment and
do
view.
you agree? Okay, we can just put comments. So maybe it's like, add your name as a comment below, and then we'll just resolve the comments.
I like what Catherine said, if it's possible, could somebody like copy and paste
I
it into
will.
a new document that's
Mhm.
coming from that person and not who
Okay,
typed in the comments or whatever.
I just want to make sure that this version doesn't get edited after people have said, I agree, and then it gets edited. So
Yeah.
that's not what I-
Yeah, make it suggesting.
And then I
Maybe
think,
comments or.
can we not do anyone, I know this takes longer, Krista, but can we not do anyone on the web? Can we do specifically the members of the task force who are still participating in the process?
So I have anyone with a link, so I'll make it restricted.
Someone could
You
follow the
can just
links.
copy and paste the emails from the contact list into the share box. Just gonna add people that are here right now. And then we'll have to add the other.
Okay,
I knew all.
I feel like we're hitting a pause point, which is good, because it's 8:07.
Let's call it done.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
This
it's
is
like.
not a pause.
Before we walk out, can we just take one moment? And I know we're out of time, but just one moment to think of a gratitude, and you can find that person and share it with them, just because this has been a lot and a lot of work. And I'm an elementary school person, so I'm gonna make you think of a gratitude. And you can just look at that person and give them a thumbs up. Or find them and tell
I would
them.
actually get out of the bank because this is a huge, it's like a huge amount of time that everyone has put in. And I know we all had different, coming from different places, different opinions, and I really have a lot of respect for all of you, for being comfortable sharing your opinions and just giving of your time. I know we all have a passion and we all want what's best for the kids, and I just thank you all for all you do. And all you've done.
I'll echo that as a board member and thank the entire task force for your guys' time, your dedication, for your commitment to help the board and the district more than anything, be able to get to a place where we can move forward and feel successful. I think even in this process, as board members, it was so important for us to be here and to participate. And we cannot thank you guys enough for giving your time, for giving us an extra meeting date, and for participating in this, because it really matters to the future of the district. So thank you guys so much for being volunteers and participating. And to our facilitators, who many times I caught unexpectedly as you walked in early. Thank you for being kind enough to facilitate and volunteer.
I would just like to echo thanking everyone, but for today specifically, thank Kendall for facilitating and getting us over the line.
Yeah, you did great.
Yeah, thanks.
You were a little late, but.
We started 9 minutes late.
The agenda said we're ending at 30.
I think we still call it.
I'm grateful to Cruz for making so many things in this district happen. And I'm also grateful to Ben and the expertise you brought to us with like the 5-down programs and just like more knowledge about how these things really work.
And Nathan, also your financial knowledge about the, and the board, thank you to the board members for being board members, because you probably don't get that told us enough, thank you.
I think also on the financials, I think thank you to the board and Nathan for actually putting the district in a position that we have $2.5 million to even think about stuff like this, rather than just being a great idea, but we've got no dollars, so, which I know a lot of school districts in this country are currently in, so.
Alan, I also want to thank you because you're the only one without a spouse who works for the district or a district employee or kids who've gone through the district, and I really appreciate you coming and having that outside perspective.
James, thanks for bringing the SWOT analysis. I actually thought that was really good. I've done those before, but the way that you led that was really effective.
Trinity and Alan, I need your emails.
Michelle,
just my-
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Wait, one sec.
There's a lot of
Thank
things
you
up.
all, I just want to say thank you all, Ms. Quigley, Thank you for tolerating my desert dry humor and for sticking it out.
Thank you, Daisy.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Sorry, what's the date?
Thank you, Daisy.
Thank you.
What's the date we're putting on this to have everybody else?
Oh, yeah.
Daisy, your bicycle's at school still?
I'm
Oh, yeah.
gonna make it less than a week.